right, welcome everyone. Find a seat. This is the Workforce Modernization and Retention Panel. My name is Megan McConnell. I'm a partner with McKinsey & Company in our Washington, D.C. office, and I lead our talent and people client service to the federal government and to DoD and the national security community specifically. The firm is committed, and we've had experience serving DoD, IC, and across the community on workforce topics spanning the full employee life cycle and strategic priorities such as preparing for the future of work, technology, Gen AI, and adapting to changing workforce preferences and labor dynamics. My colleagues and I are so proud that McKinsey is a sponsor of this year's Sea, Air, Space Conference. We were founded nearly 100 years ago in 1926 by a US Army veteran. So before you hold that against us, I also want to flag that besides you all, I'm pretty sure there's no organization on the planet more committed to the color navy blue than McKinsey. In all seriousness, since our founding, we've had a dual mission: the highest quality client service and creating an unrivaled environment for exceptional people. I certainly don't think it's an accident that it was a veteran that put those values at the core of who we are. We as McKinsey take pride in our service to the Navy on topics ranging from supply chain resilience to acquisition excellence, technology, digital, and of course, workforce. For me, the most exciting and meaningful work is that which positively impacts the careers, experiences, and quality of life of Navy men and women. Just last week, I was speaking with an admiral, and we started talking about culture change and people mission. And naturally, we started talking about mission first, people always. But then he said something that really stuck with me. He said, too often, that's a quote. We say it, but we don't necessarily mean it. And as leaders, we have to mean it. I have no doubt that the esteemed panel on this stage means it. Indeed, I am honored and excited to be standing here with these leaders and want to thank the Navy League for making space for this critical discussion on workforce modernization and retention. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the moderator of this panel, Ms. Arvise Washington. Ms. Washington is the director for the Department of the Navy's Office of Small Business Programs. She has more than 20 years of experience with small business, program management, and business and financial management. Ms. Washington, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you to the Navy League. This is going to be a great panel discussion today. So in an age of great power competition and a race for the most lethal fleet, we face a serious threat from within: the withering away of the lifeblood of the nation's maritime enterprise, a skilled workforce and plentiful workforce. Globally, we are facing this challenge: a shortage of skilled workers and service members in the United States, and we are struggling to secure and retain the talent and experience of these time-honored professionals. Thank you for joining us in this discussion on how we are going to meet the needs of our industrial base and our uniformed military while understanding and adapting to the requirements of this new age of modern workforce. Thank you to this esteemed panel. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and give a 5-minute brief introduction of what they do, who they are, and what we're going to talk about today.
Good morning, ma'am. Thanks for the time today. Thanks to the Navy League. Thanks to the Sea, Air, Space team for putting this together, and thanks to my panel members for coming today. I look forward to a rich discussion. As mentioned, my name is Rick Cheeseman. I am the Chief of Naval Personnel. Born and raised in a small town in New Jersey, and ended up at Penn State on an ROTC scholarship and commissioned in 1989 through the ROTC program there. So for anybody out there, go Birds, go Phillies. You got to get that in any chance I can. Boo, there you go. We'll talk later. Career surface warfare officer, ended up in the My Navy HR enterprise for the first time, post-command as a detailer down in Millington, Tennessee. And now, for the last almost 2 years, I'm lucky enough to head an organization that has thousands of professionals that do nothing other than ensuring personnel readiness for the United States Navy. That's our mission. That's our core job. Function every day with a clear vision of ensuring that our sailors can be solely focused on the mission because they trust us to take care of them and their family. So that's what our laser focus is on every day. There are many lines of effort in what we're doing in our sort of our strategic documents on how we're getting after this, but foundationally, it really hinges on three things. We must have a sailor-informed, data-driven talent management system where sailors feel like they're part of the process. Second, we feel like we must have steady recruitment and steady training. And I know recruiting is a big topic these days, and I'm ready and able to fill up the full hour talking about recruiting if you like. And third, we must have a rock-solid Navy culture where adaptive sailors and families, resilient sailors and families are able to thrive in what we ask them to do. That's what we're looking to do. That's what we're driving on. That's what we want to get done. And that's what we want our sailors to respect and trust us in as we move forward. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, looking forward to the questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Thomas. I serve as the Deputy Commandant for Mission Support for the U.S. Coast Guard. For those of you with Navy experience, that includes the 1469 shops, as well as a lot of other cats and dogs. But for the sake of today, I do have the personnel under me, including all the training. And I'm excited about this topic because when you talk about modernization, we in the military services, and I think all of our panelists, we really do need to modernize how we manage talent. If you think about the system that we currently have, it was created when our workforce was mostly male, mostly single, at least at the junior levels. And when they weren't single, they were single wage earner families. And they pretty much were willing to just follow orders and do what that's not our workforce today. And quite honestly, we have been lazy in how we manage talent in the military services. We've pretty much managed our workforce as a monolithic block. Everyone starts in the same place, progresses at the same rate, ends up in the same place. You're up or out, you got to start at the bottom. That doesn't work anymore. And when you talk about modernizing talent management, you're talking about blowing up some of those old paradigms. And I'm looking forward to talking about exactly what that means. But the fundamental shift is to understand and manage your workforce at the individual level and match individual needs and skills with service needs. That's not easy. It's a lot easier to manage it as a monolithic block. But in a modernized talent management system, you have exquisite understanding of each member of your workforce, and then you manage that talent. And that's what we're working toward. And I know the Navy is, all the services are. Mm-hmm. And I really do appreciate the partnership that we've had with the Navy and the other services as we work to understand what modernized talent management looks like. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Kumar?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thanks to the Navy League for inviting us for this panel, to join this panel and share our thoughts and ideas. From our perspective, we have very similar challenges to the other services. But before I go into it, a little bit about myself. I'm a former mariner. I sailed for 10 years. I'm a master mariner, and then switched over to higher education for a couple of decades, and then has been in civil service for the last few years. And my portfolio right now within the Maritime Administration is maritime labor, education, and training. So in that capacity, I work with all the maritime academies, including the Federal Academy at Kings Point, where I was the dean for almost 9 years. And I also work with all the state maritime academies. There are 6 state maritime academies. And recently, we have nominated centers of excellence for domestic maritime workforce training and education. So those are about 50 institutions nationwide, and also in the island of Guam. So we work with all these institutions, plus labor unions, union-operated schools, and so forth. The intent is to educate and inspire the next generation of maritime workforce, which has been sort of the Maritime Administration's key goal, starting from the very day our organization was established. That's going back to the Merchant Marine Act of 1936. So we have a long commitment towards that. And as I said earlier, our challenges right now are very similar to what the Navy faces, the Coast Guard faces, but there are some differences in the sense that we also have a commercial angle. Our mariners obviously operate the commercial vessels for the economic security of the nation, in addition to supporting the national security needs by running our strategic sea lift fleet. and I look forward to making more comments later on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Garcia?
Thanks, Arvis. Good morning. The last time I was summoned before 2 3-stars, I was a JO, and it was a much less happy situation. I'm Juan Garcia. I'm Managing Director at Deloitte's Defense, Security, and Justice sector. I served as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy Manpower in the administration before last, and I'm a retired naval aviator. Some of my peers like to say a nasal radiator. My focus this morning will be on the challenge of recruiting our civilian shipbuilding and ship maintaining population to the industrial base. More than 30 years after the wall came down, 20 years of the longest sustained combat operations in American history against a force that didn't have a Navy. We find ourselves with a near-peer threat that looms to the west, at least in terms of hull count, outnumbers us. And as a result of the demand for shipbuilding is higher than it's been in 40 years, the population to do it is 2/3 of what it was 40 years ago. So if you've seen any March Madness or the Super Bowl or NASCAR, you've seen the Blue Forge Alliance commercials, right? We build giants, we build submarines. They're awesome. They look like Michael Bay movies. But if you know that advertising space, like I know Admiral Cheeseman does, to get that kind of penetration, saturation against that program, that's a serious investment, which speaks to the need and the demand. And it's a well-validated demand. In 2020 GAO study found between 2015 and 2019, 75% of every scheduled aircraft, carrier, and submarine maintenance period was delayed for one of two reasons: non-forecast work and workforce capacity issues. Last year, then NAVSEA Vice Admiral Galinas said the #1 strategic challenge for NAVSEA was workforce capacity issues. I suspect there's a bunch of leaders in this room who are involved in submarine manufacturing, part of the ecosystem. Meeting that and meeting our AUKUS commitments is, you're seeing the headlines, right? Newport News says they'll need to hire 3,000 trained shipyard trade workers this year, another 19,000 by 2030. Hampton Roads Workforce Council forecasts 40,000 shipyard vacancies before the end of the decade. In December, at the big suppliers conference, SecNav said across the full enterprise over the next decade, we've got to find 150,000 skilled shipyard trade workers. You might have heard SecNav yesterday talk about the 45-day review. You're following the news on this. Vice Admiral Downey and Secretary Gertin reported last week, and a key part of their findings, part of the complex set of issues that are leading to these schedule delays, are the workforce capacity issues. But there was a dedicated panel of this yesterday, full of folks who are smart, committed folks, entities that are doing really important work in this area. The piece I hope to share with you today, talk about with this group of Navy leaders and influencers, is the role of AI and analytics in that solution, the predictive insights we can get to help move this campaign from playing checkers to playing chess and make fully informed decisions across the full recruiting cycle. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. So as you can see, the challenge isn't just government, but government and industry. We're both experiencing this workforce challenge. And as we look to modernize how we manage talent, can you talk about your current workforce challenges and what are some of the things you're doing to get after these challenges? And I'll start with you, sir.
Absolutely. So the recruiting issue aside, I'll talk right now about the current workforce and potential future workforce in my answer here. And it really comes down to how you train who you have and then how you plan for the future. So for us, really two different lines of effort. Our Ready Relevant Learning effort that we've been involved in for a number of years really gets at how we modernize the content on how we train folks and modernize the delivery systems, and eventually getting to one common learning management system that can be seen throughout the entire Navy. These efforts are ongoing. There's a lot of emphasis there with Fleet Forces as the executive agent that's really rallied the type commanders to work with my Naval Education and Training Commands to get at what the cutting edge on technology is, to figure out different ways to deliver training. It doesn't have to be the traditional go back to a schoolhouse, make it brick and mortar. We have virtual reality, we have augmented reality. There are other opportunities where we can get into those systems where a sailor may not ever have to leave their family or leave the pier even, where they can train in the local area as opposed to disrupting them and disrupting the unit, so they can train for current and future jobs at the same time. And key to that is the integration with our training commands, think Strike Group 4, Strike Group 15, as we find gaps and seams through our training event or a real world thing, Sync the Red Sea right now, that we rapidly turn that around into the schoolhouses now so our current generation can learn the cutting edge things that we need to fight and win in the future. So that's going pretty well. Where sometimes we falter, but I do have a good news to share, is sort of the forward-looking skill sets. How do you determine what you need in the future, 10 years, 20 years down the road? And you have to have that forward-looking mindset. And in uniform, we may not have the people needed to have that forward-looking mindset. That's why partnering with industry is really important as you're developing different technologies for both our manned and unmanned systems. You're learning from industry on how to maintain it, how we may operate it. And I'll use robotics as an example here. And I know SecNav, this week talked about the establishment of our rating, but as we were working through that, as we started looking at different things like, hey, is this going to be, human supervised type work in the unmanned world? Is it going to be human machine integrated type of work? Is it going to be both? We'd already had NECs for discrete skill sets, but as we looked at it, it really crossed the entire unrestricted line domain, all warfare domains. And we saw, we see right now robotics vehicles in the air, surface and subsurface domains are out there, right? So my predecessor, John Now, started a working group back in 2022 to really look at this, to see what we would need. We partnered with industry. We partnered with our reserve force because we had some unique talents there that could lead this effort. We partnered with our Navy civilians, so it was totally a total force effort and try to get to the way ahead. And we ultimately decided that, yes, it must be a rating on its own. And we established this in February of this year. A lot of interest in the fleet on this. A lot of sailors want to rating convert into it, which is awesome. We're trying to make sure we do no harm to some significant ratings out there. But building a small cadre now, working through the schoolhouse to see what that looks like, to develop the total career path from E1 to E9 on what that would look like over time. And we anticipate having a full up-around schoolhouse in a couple years. So pretty important as we look at what these systems are doing. Our robotics warfare specialists will work on maritime planning, the autonomous vehicle mission planning, the autonomous navigation, the computer feedback, computer sensing, a lot of different tasks in there that we just weren't thinking about, and we were driving towards in the future. So now we're laser focused on it and in a much better spot. So a lot of good teaming with industry on this effort.
Great news. Thank you for sharing.
Certainly.
Admiral.
So you asked about workforce challenge. I think the service challenges are to make it easier to serve and to continue to serve for a career. That's the fundamental challenge. And there's a lot that we're doing in order to make our talent management more transparent, repeatable, predictable, allow people to plan their careers, and then provide world-class support to members and their families, including world-class learning opportunities. But if you talk to the workforce about the challenge, and particularly for the Coast Guard, because our workforce is different than the other services, we're different because we operate in small tactical units that are out in the field and in many cases in remote resort areas, right? That's where the Coast Guard is. Beautiful land, by the way, but the challenge for our workforce are the fundamental things: access to housing, access to healthcare, access to childcare, and basic pay and allowances. And all the services have testified, and I had the opportunity to testify in Congress, that those are the things that threaten the all-volunteer force right now. And if we can't get after those fundamental things, and the services can only do so much, we will continue to be challenged. So we're working hard, in addition to modernizing our talent management processes to be more transparent and predictable. But we're working hard on the Hill to ensure that we can meet the basic needs of our crew members, particularly our junior crew members, and all the services are involved there. Mm-hmm. But in terms of what this group can do for the services, it's to continue to advocate for particularly better access to healthcare, housing, childcare, and basic pay and allowance. And that is the crux of our challenge right now. That is what's impacting both our ability to recruit and our ability to retain.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So our challenges are somewhat unique in the sense that the Maritime Administration doesn't employ people. We don't employ the mariners. These are employed by companies, organizations, etc. We don't have a service section of our own, in other words. We promote education, we promote training, and definitely there is a significant shortage of qualified merchant mariners out there. Unfortunately, our industry often gets the attention when something goes wrong. And you all know what happened a couple of weeks ago in Baltimore. Merchant ship, 5,000 containers, struck a bridge, and now you know, a serious problem. That's when you get attention. Or when a ship goes the other way around in Suez Canal, and when the whole world commerce is stopped. As you can imagine, the attention, the significance that the average person gives to the merchant marine sector has gone down over the years. So needless to say, our ability to attract young people to work on ships, to be trained as merchant mariners, has been affected. There's no question about it. During the COVID crisis, the pandemic crisis, all of a sudden there was some realization that you know, these people play a big role in terms of getting our supplies, you know, keeping our lifestyle and getting our TVs and VCRs or whatever we are getting from China or Korea or other parts of the world. Plus all the personal protection equipments and whatnot. So the necessities, you need the merchant mariners, the ships to operate, the commercial ships to operate, to bring these items. So that's the commercial side of what we do. And then we also have the national security side, which is providing the logistical support for our armed forces. We operate 48 ready reserve force ships right now, which are crewed by merchant mariners who are civilians. But we have a contract with labor unions and companies to operate those ships. I think many of you know that at present we have a significant shortage of merchant mariners in this country. And mind you, this is not just here in this country, this is worldwide. There is a shortage of merchant mariners. And it so happens that all our academies that bring in new officers, every one of them are having recruitment challenges. Their enrollment has suffered over the years. Even before COVID, it had started going down. And during COVID years, it did certainly take another hit. It's gradually stabilizing at this point. So the anticipation is that this will pick up over the years and help overcome some of these challenges. Now, once they come on board, once they come as merchant mariners, not everyone has a service obligation. It's only a very small number of mariners who have the service obligation to report when called upon. So that's where our problem is, you know, the demand versus supply, and how do we address those issues. And for those people who come on board, the question is, how do you maintain their commitment? In other words, how do you retain those people? Those are some of the areas that we are paying a lot more attention right now. It's not enough just to recruit people, but you've got to retain them. So in terms of that retention, what are some of the things that we can do? Incentivizing their career choices, breaking down some of the barriers, changing the culture within the industry. These are all areas that we are paying a lot of attention to these days.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Garcia?
Sure. RB, let me come at it from this way. We, Deloitte, are working with Blue Forge Alliance, right? That's the 15,000 suppliers across the country, all the way up to EB and HII. The whole ecosystem required to build submarines, all working together to meet the needs of the industrial base. I mentioned the commercials, the ads before, and they're working, right? They're driving people to the BFA portal, what we call the talent repository. And you know, the ads have created hundreds of millions of impressions. They've driven tens of thousands of Americans to the portal. When they sign up, give their information, the following happens. They have access to all the job listings across the Alliance, 15,000 suppliers. The Alliance, in turn, has access to those individuals' CVs, backgrounds, if you will. They can reach out to them for specific opportunities. When there's matches, they're notified automatically. That's great. Nothing but goodness there. But that's the checkers piece. Here's how we turn this into chess. Every individual who goes in and provides that information, we've now got data points on where they're from, their willingness to relocate, their certifications, their qualifications, their education levels, what specific component of the shipyard trades they're interested in. Are they willing to undergo training for that? When can they be available? And when they actually take a role, job, that information gets even more rich and granular. So, and that's the objective. We want to find exactly that cohort who the data tells us is most interested and most likely to engage in this. And then we want to go find more of them. So if we take that data and we enrich it with a tool like Deloitte's proprietary People Prism, right? That's a data set with 1,700 specific attributes, financial, demographic, behavioral, lifestyle, for 230 million US adults and their households. All open source and all updated monthly. And now with uncanny precision, we know exactly, these are the attributes of people who are interested, we know where to go find more of them. And now a Blue Forge Alliance, armed with that information, instead of a generic, expensive mass mailer, says, are you interested in shipyard work? Now these are precision, detailed messaging, right? Whatever your piece is, we zero in on that. It's the difference between a recruiter making 100 blind cold calls a day and making 15 surgically precise strike calls to those individuals most likely to engage. Now, I suspect Admiral Cheeseman wakes up thinking about recruiting, goes to sleep thinking about recruiting.
You are correct.
I think he would agree that a single contact, right, is not enough to get a young American to raise their right hand and ship off to Great Lakes. It's a process, it's a continuing discussion. So for us, the best practices are that prospecting piece, and the data set gives us that. We know where they are and what their backgrounds and their profiles are. And then we've got to attract them. And now instead of that generic outreach, it's a targeted AI-generated message that resonates specifically with them. We know, is it welding? Is it additive manufacturing? Is it construction? Is it CNC machining? Is it pipe fitting? Is it electrical? Is it meteorology? And we tailor that message to them. And then there's the engagement piece, right? Let's make it a two-way conversation. If I know you're a CNC machining person, I want you to ask, and we want to give you the information on, well, where do I train for that? How long does that take? When can I start? What's on the other side? What jobs are available? How much does it pay? When does it start? Right, now we're engaged. And then the last piece is, you alluded to this, Doctor, it's retaining that interest, right? And for us, that's full transparency. The way you retain that interest is showing them what folks similarly situated who made that step across a psychological chasm, this is what worked for them. This is what they're doing now. Are they thriving? Are they happy? Are they advancing professionally? Are they building a career out of this? We call it Recruit 360. It's the model we're using to help the Coast Guard with their recruiting, the Army with their recruiting crisis, Customs Border Protection, first responders across the country. And it's allowed us to, in the Blue Forge Alliance example, in the last 5 months, give them 15,000 highly curated, precise points of contact and names in just 3 small regions, right? That's the Great Lakes, New England, Mid-Atlantic. Now we take this across the country.
So you talked about, Mr. Garcia, the growth in the submarine industrial base, your challenges there in finding that workforce and that technology component. Are there other things we should be doing to address that shipyard shortage?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And let me be clear. We ain't the Lone Ranger in this, right? This is a worldwide phenomenon. You probably heard the Secretary of yesterday talk about his recent visits to the new shipyards in Japan and South Korea. You've probably read and heard about these kind of admiring, sometimes really fawning pieces about the state-of-the-art shipyards in Japan and South Korea. But know that they've got the same workforce challenges we do. They're relying on guest worker programs from Nepal and Vietnam. You work on a submarine here, you got to be a citizen, and you've got to have access and be able to hold the clearance, right? It's a little bit more challenging. Noted naval observer Ron O'Rourke, a lot of you know him, said that the maritime industries are not the bright, shiny object for a lot of young people. Things like crypto and currency are. So we're not alone in this. And I want to be clear that there are committed, brilliant folks who are living in this space every day and moving the needle, right? Maritime Institute up in Eastern Connecticut has become a national model in taking the unemployed and the underemployed, training them in the trades. Sendia, Southeast New England Defense Industrial Alliance, has trained, they partnered with EB, they've made 1,400 submarine builders. Next year, we'll open the doors on a 100,000 square foot training facility out in Danville, Virginia. It'll generate 800 to 1,000 shipyard workers in everything from 3D printing to welding starting next year. America Makes, consortium of additive manufacturers. The Navy itself, NAVSEA, is running roadshow, open house pipelines across all the places you think they are, Long Island and Philly and Hampton Roads and places like that. All goodness. But to me, there are four key levers, four key cards still left to play that we need to think about. One is the most obvious, it's the compensation piece, right? People have to look at these jobs and see a career with room for advancement that they can raise a family with, right? You hear a lot about the greening of the workforce. That is, the most senior, experienced personnel are retiring faster than we could hire new and inexperienced personnel to replace them. So, for example, if you're a experienced, skilled submarine welder, which is kind of the most valuable player, the quarterback in a lot of this space, you're commanding upwards of $70 an hour. Now, it takes a long time to get that experience and that qualification. If you're a new submarine welder, you're probably right around plus or minus $35 an hour, depending on geography and experience. Now, I did the homework on this week. Starbucks franchise number 65179. That's in Norfolk. That's on the base. This week, that store is hiring shift supervisors at $35 an hour, right? And that's full benefits. That's healthcare. That's stock. That's savings. That's all the coffee you can drink, right? So that's what we're up against. We got to get the price point right, and so that it's worth it to people. And we've got to do it in a way that we don't create a bidding war between the private yards and the public yards, and make the exorbitantly expensive shipbuilding enterprise even more expensive. Number two, I'd love to build a pipeline from Admiral Cheeseman's uniform recruiters to the shipyard recruiters. It goes like this. When a young American man or woman wants to serve in uniform, and they're tripped up by the Genesis medical background scrub, and they had childhood asthma, or they saw a psychologist when their folks split up when they were 12, or they were on antidepressants for some period, whatever it is, the NPQs that makes them not physically qualified. I'd like the next stop to be the shipyard workers, right? Our recruiters, and say, hey, there's other ways to serve, right? You can still be a part of national defense and serve your country and build a career and raise a family. Three, surge main. Surge maintenance. You're following the news about the schedule slips in Colombia. Our highest priority, must have, fact of life, the critical leg in the strategic iron triangle. A rich, complex mosaic of reasons why Colombia could be delayed. But if workforce capacity is one of them, then I think we have to consider the option of surge maintenance. That's our reservist cohort who have expertise and background in the shipbuilding trade work. In many cases, that's what they do in their civilian jobs, in their day jobs, right? And if that's part of the challenge with Colombia, I think we have to consider mobilizing them in that capacity. We've done it before. At the peak of COVID, we mobilized 1,600 reservist surge main to fill in for that workforce. Largest naval mobilization since 9/11. So we've got that card to play as well. Last piece.
Quickly.
Very quickly. I think it looks a lot like Admiral Cheeseman's challenges. We've got to go to places we haven't gone before. Displaced workers, transitioning vets, adult learners looking for their second job. And we got to go to different geography. Got to get past the smile of the country, right? West Coast, Gulf Coast, East Coast, and get to the middle of the country. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you have questions for the panel here, you can come up to the mic. You have a question, sir?
Yes, hi. Hi, I'm Steve Moretto. I was the N11 Engineering and Science Community Manager for a little while, way back. And back then, they formed something called the Center for Innovation in Ship Design and gave grants to universities, mostly the naval engineering community, so that we would have future naval architects. So I'm thinking that there should be something related to their additive manufacturing industrial base or industrial base like that. And also, so I want to see if there was anything going on with that. And there's also this book called Freedom's Forge, written by a historian, where he talked about what it took to sort of get ready for World War II and have that industrial base be ready to ramp up for a larger conflict. So I'd like your thoughts on either the book or having a program, grant program for the manufacturing industrial base.
Is that for Mr. Garcia?
Whoever wants to take it.
I think I can be real brief. I'm an aviator. Of course, I don't know the book. But in terms of additive manufacturing, I think I may mention, I urge you to look it up. America Makes. It's a consortium that's focused exclusively on that piece. To your original point, we tend to focus on the folks in the yards, turning wrenches, firing up welding torches. But the shipyard designers and engineers are just as critical as well. There's the same shortage applies. So I think just like the flag officers would say, creating that awareness early, K through 12, at a time that may have slipped away in the last couple decades, it's got to be a piece of the puzzle as well.
Sort of like the Sea Perch program.
Like a sea perch, right.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Trish Martinelli from the Office of Small Business Programs at the DoD. I'd like to talk a little bit about when we introduce the idea of these career possibilities to potential future employees. Maybe start with the uniformed side and then go to the civilian side. On background, one of my mental models is the National Security Agency used to have a great program where they would meet high school students right at their first year of high school and then consecutively have summer programs and eventually a college for employment program. And I'm wondering maybe how early we're getting into the minds of potential future employees so that maybe we're painting a picture all through their high school career for what is possible when they finish.
Admiral?
Sure, I'll start there. So I find what you're talking about to be key to recruiting, right? I can't recruit somebody in kindergarten. I can certainly recruit them once they get of age, but what you're talking about is outreach and the foundation building of somebody who understands what it may be like, as far as life in the military is. The Chief of Naval Information runs our outreach program. I think we do a really good job coordinating the events between his office and my recruiters. So when we're going to a certain area for Fleet Week or a very small or a much smaller visit in some other venue, there are people doing outreach, getting into high schools, getting into middle schools, just being available for the local community through those local governments to talk about, types of careers in the Navy. And then there are folks that we can, actively recruit as well. That really is key. But I will tell you that it is not, in today's environment, it is less so with the recruitable population. They understand it. They want to. Year over year, month over month, we're getting plenty of interest in the United States Navy. Where we lose it is with the influencers. It's become generational a little bit. I need everybody who is associated with the military to talk about a career in the military, to be able to talk to a young person about service. It is our stats are very clear as we dive into the data. It takes 10 cold calls to get a recruit. It's a 10-to-1 conversion rate. If anybody is actively mentoring that recruit, it's a 7-to-1 conversion rate. If the active mentor is associated with the Navy, that's what I track, associated with the Navy, that's active duty, reserve, retired, Navy contractor, government civilian, anybody associated with it, it's a 5-to-1 conversion rate, 50% better. All right, so influencing the influencers of where we need to be. So that outreach isn't just with the younger population, it is with all of us as well, and you all can help us play a part with that. It's really important.
Admiral?
Yeah, so beyond the influencers, there are active counter recruiters out there, and particularly in certain parts of the country. And there are places where young men and women are taking the ASVAB tests and they are instructed, do not check the box that says I can be contacted by a recruiter. So it's a cultural issue. The CNO mentioned the other day that the Navy suffers from sea blindness. Well, I got to tell you, Admiral, the Navy has a lot more visibility than the Coast Guard does, right? And we're challenged in people even understanding who we are and what we do. And most of you in this room don't understand who we are and what we do. Historically, though, the Coast Guard has not had to be good at recruiting because we're small enough and we have a cool enough mission and we're just really neat people that we had them lined up, right? That's not the case anymore, so we are just really starting to build our recruiting capacity. And you asked, how early do we get at? And we're opening up JROTC units around the nation now, and the Congress passed a law that said we have to have so many in place by next year, and we're on track to do that. But that, that's just to get people to understand who the service is and what the opportunities are. And quite honestly, JROTC programs have not historically brought us recruits, but at least they do help us build brand awareness, if you will. And in terms of brand awareness, we are a military service, but we're different. And so we try to make that difference clear. Because we have an environmental mission, we have an emergency response mission. The Coast Guard is leading the response in Baltimore right now. These are things that a lot of young women and men would be energized by if only they had awareness. And so it is really key for us to get out there, tell our entire Coast Guard story. And just like my colleagues here, we need everybody in the room to be thinking about that as you're talking to people about opportunities in all the military services.
Absolutely. Dr. Kumar?
Sure. It's kind of funny. I have to follow two admirals who say that they have visibility problems compared to the Merchant Marine. When we tell we are the Merchant Marine, most people, hey, you guys, which war do you fight? That's the kind of question that we get. So yes, we do have a significant visibility problem. And I do agree that recruitment should begin fairly, well, not exactly recruitment, but outreach promotion should start at young age. As a former college educator, I would say middle school is the appropriate age group. Grades 5, 6, 7, that's when you can influence the young mind. And I'm not sure how many of you were here to see or participate or just come and take a look at the STEM Expo we had here on Sunday. There were more than 3,000 little kids who were here. And that's just here in this area, DC, Virginia, Maryland area. If similar interest is displayed all over the country, that'll be phenomenal, I would say. But fact of the matter is that when it comes to recruitment, post-graduation, our pool is very small. The students who are graduating from high school, post-secondary, probably about 1/5 of that may be qualified for career opportunities in our fields. That's about it. And even within that field, the number of students who are seeking college education, that has gone down dramatically over the years. That's what our college presidents tell us. Their numbers are dropping because, number one, the high school age population is dropping, and the number of students who want to pursue those opportunities are dropping as well. Monday morning, the service chief segment, the general from Marine Corps mentioned that you can join the Marine Corps as entry-level person making salary X, or you can join work for Starbucks making X. And if you're in the Marine Corps, after 3-4 years, you'll make 2X, 3X, 4X like that. Fact of the matter is that we are not just in competition with the Starbucks of the world. We are so much more in competition with the new technology and artificial intelligence and so forth. These young kids can easily make outstanding opportunities, find outstanding opportunities in those fields without a college degree these days. That's where the problem is. And historically, the Merchant Marine used to pay pretty well, but now our salaries can be easily matched by any of these companies, if not outsmarted by this. So yes, we do have a K-12 program, but given our resources, it is limited. We work with maritime high schools. There are approximately about 70 plus maritime high schools nationwide. And then we have these centers of excellence for domestic maritime workforce training and education, which are community colleges and technical colleges. So what we are trying to do is to build a pipeline starting from that school-age kids all the way through community colleges leading towards maritime academies so as to inspire and educate the next generation of maritime workforce.
Great. Thank you, sir. Next question.
Good morning. Thank you for doing this. Sam Walker. I'm a contractor with NAVC. So we talked about pay equity quite a bit, and I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to the issue with folks being virtual and that type of thing. And I realize we're talking primarily about shipyard workers, but that seemed to have been a big concern since we went through the COVID timeframe, and now we're back. So I'm just curious to know if that's becoming a challenge for recruiting folks and things of that nature, and how we're dealing with that challenge. Thank you.
Are you having any challenges with the return to work after COVID, where we were in a virtual footprint before 100% and now that return to work? Are you experiencing any challenges there with retaining your personnel?
Well, yeah, or portions of our workforce. I mean, most of the work of the Coast Guard can't be done remotely. Most shipyard work can't be done remotely, but there are functions, particularly in our civilian workforce, our contracting officers, our personnelists. We are in stiff competition for our civilian workforce as well, and we have to offer telework and remote work, or we will not have that workforce. So we've figured out how to do that. I think the real challenge on telework and remote work is for the leaders, for the supervisors to figure out how do you keep that workforce engaged, how to keep them connected to the mission. But you can overcome that, and in today's competitive environment, you better do that or you're not going to survive.
Yeah. No concern from the Navy either, at least in my enterprise, which is what I'll speak to. But for our civilians, we do have a hybrid solution, some remote work, some still on max telework. We've even offered that to our active duty folks, recognizing that the world changed a little bit coming out of COVID. So some of our active duty folks do telework as well. They got to come back, and maintain some semblance of a footprint in the building every once in a while. But I am confident that we're getting the mission done where we are now. Certainly there's duty stations out there where you can't do it, but I'm able to have a little bit of that luxury, and my folks are rallying appropriately.
The second half is 45-day review that we heard about yesterday and you've all been reading about this week. If you look at the charter of it, it's actually about assessing the impact of COVID a couple years back. So I mentioned Surge Main. I remember if you're at NAVC, that mobilization of 1,600 reservists. But as we said, at the end of the day, we've got to have folks firing in the shipyard trades, turning wrenches and firing torches. Real quick, to put a punctuation point on the woman's question about K through 12, I think there's a conventional wisdom that the traditional commercial ads that might have attracted us as JOs, be all you can be, it's not just a job, it's an adventure, trailed off as this awareness built that 17 to 24-year-olds don't consume information in commercials like we used to. That's why you might not see as many Navy ads, but I think Admiral Cheeseman's teams, if you turned on the X Games or something like that, they've blanketed it. I think that's all real. What might get lost and why BFA is still relying on this traditional commercial advertising is the influencers still do see the commercials, right? The parents, the relatives, the guidance counselors, the coaches, the faith leaders, and they're a vital part of making those young people aware as early as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Sir?
I feel like I've just been tossed a softball. I'm Arnold Gordon Bray. I'm a former infantry airborne ranger and the son of a veteran of the USS Ticonderoga, World War II. Look around this room and you'll notice that there's not a whole lot of folks that look like me. NDAA, which was produced by our legislature in 2014, basically saying that we want to go to our women's institutions, our HSIs, our other diversity schools, HBCUs, and it puts a requirement on the Department of Defense to develop a pipeline. You talked about it, that's a softball. By the way, you are a cool service too, sir. But they don't know us, and be all you can be really is about putting the uniform on. That's the preponderance. We've got to go into the schools and show early on that everybody doesn't have to serve. Some people have some challenges physically, because I don't know if this room knows this, but only 30% of the 72 to 75% who graduate from high school can't even join our military because of physical, something else has happened in their lives that keeps them out. But their minds can still be used. And see, that part of our service is not being addressed. So now to the question, what are we doing to educate the whole of this nation that Executive Order 9981 that was executed on the 26th of July in 1948 was not just about integrating the military service, but the Department of Defense. and getting that balance back right and developing a pipeline of minds who can do the work that this thing called the Department of Defense does for our nation and our world. I hope that's clear.
I'll jump on that initially. I can't speak for the entire Department of Defense. I can speak for the Navy service. All right, we are very comfortable that we're meeting the intent of that executive order through the programs we have in place. We are laser focused on making sure the Navy, I'm talking the uniform component, is a place where all Americans can see themselves succeed. It doesn't matter where they come from, who they are. It's about having equal access to the opportunity to succeed, and we are certain we're doing that. We're doing that through our culture efforts. I mean, we can talk all day about having the next, brand new, biggest, shiny thing, having the best systems to manage their careers. But if sailors and civilians, quite frankly, we're talking about the Department of the Navy writ large. If we don't, get people involved in government, then we're going to fail as well. But I'm certain that at least on the service side of things, that if they don't trust us, it doesn't matter, right? And the recruitable generation today wants a couple things. They want to feel a sense of purpose in what they're doing, and they want to know their leadership cares. And that's all about culture. That's about respect and trust. That's about inclusion. That's about people feeling connected to the people and the mission that they're performing. So if you build that culture, you're going to fight and win in combat. You're going to be able to solve hard problems. You're going to be able to innovate, and you're going to be able to take care of people, ensure those harmful behaviors are small in number. All right. It's no secret that we recently rolled out Culture of Excellence 2.0. That is our most recent commitment to the sailors of our Navy. It is built on those things I talked about. It is built on, taking the talent that the country gives us and molding them into the people, the teams, and leaders that we need to win, as CNO says, and to make sure we have the right players on the field. So, we took a hard look at ourselves as we were developing that. Where were we good at developing people, teams, and leaders? Where were we not so good? Really learned some lessons. And then we took CNO's call through Get Real, Get Better to think, act, and operate differently to develop, the processes that were put in place today and the governance that we have, that we hold commanders accountable for the culture that we're putting in place. So I think we're on a good path to do the things you're talking about. I think we've made tremendous strides in recent years to get at this topic, and I am confident in the way ahead, at least in the service of the Navy.
And also, the Secretary signed out the Maritime National
Absolutely.
Call to Service, which isn't just the military uniform.
That's right.
It's that non-uniform, that civilian footprint as well.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how much he had talked about that, or I didn't want to get ahead of the Secretary.
Well,
but he
that's coming. Be on the lookout for it.
He is certainly laser focused on exactly what you're talking about. We need some sort of call to service. When I talk to professional staffers on the Hill about this stuff, it's not just the Navy, it's that government writ large. Down to the local level police force, we're having problems. The local school boards, the local government. It's about government service writ large. We need talented people to get involved.
Yeah, well, I would say no question culture is king. And if you had the opportunity to attend the Coast Guard breakfast this morning, you heard a lot about what the Coast Guard's doing along the same lines. To ensure that we have a culture where everybody feels part of the team and feels welcome and safe. That is really critical. But with regard to URM, underrepresented minority recruiting in particular, I mentioned earlier that, in the past we haven't really had to be good at recruiting, but we did have the luxury in the past, because we were always able to fill the buses to boot camp, to recruit specifically looking for women and minorities. We don't have that luxury anymore. And so as we come out of this crisis, recruiting crisis, I think unfortunately, the Coast Guard is going to be a less diverse organization than we were going into it. And that's just the reality of having to build a workforce without the luxury of really being choosy about it.
Thank you. We do have time for one more question. Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander Strand. Admiral Cheeseman, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Admiral Thomas, thank you for being here, everyone. My question is a little bit for the admirals in terms of retention compared to recruitment. I'm kind of curious for your thoughts on, we need to continue recruiting if we're not retaining. And is there a way to adequately repurpose our individuals that are leaving voluntarily or being forced out of the military to fill some of those critical recruitment gaps that we have?
Sure.
And then kind of on the side with that, the MAVNI program that we used to have, to your question, Mr. Garcia, about can we repurpose or use non-immigrant workforce in a calculated and efficient way to meet some of these challenging gaps, both for our military and our civilian sector?
Yeah, so I'm conscious of the time, but real quick, so in the Navy, to be clear, we are crushing retention. Retention in all zones. If I can get a sailor in the Navy, they're generally staying in the Navy. 0 to 6 years of service, about 117% of goal. 6 to 10 years of service, rated 100%. And there's some interesting statistics in there that we're deep diving. And if I can get you past 10, the careerism, well over 100%. So we're good. To your point about the folks who may not be eligible for all types of sea duty, non-deployable things, we are taking a hard look at what other services do before sailors get into the IDES process, to figure out, there's been a culture of if you're not worldwide deployable, you got to go. We're changing that culture. If you can do any job in the Navy, it's a reason for you to stay, and we welcome you to stay. So we're driving towards that.
Yeah, I would say very similarly, you need to spend at least as much on retention as you do on recruiting. But that looks like all the other things that I mentioned: housing, healthcare, childcare. That's how you retain your workforce, and that's really where we're focused, as well as being much more flexible on who we can allow to stay in the service. I mentioned earlier that we used to just treat everyone as a monolithic block. Everybody must be worldwide deployable. Can't afford to do that anymore. It's a lot harder to manage a workforce that way, but we are finding ways to keep people in the service, and if we can't keep them in the service, allow them to serve in other capacities.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have a few minutes left. Do you have any closing remarks, sir?
I would just tell you that there's a lot of discussion about the recruiting challenges, right? I would tell you that the kids are all right, right? I mean, the kids are just fine. And if you're concerned about the current generation of folks, just look at the Red Sea, all right? They're doing just fine. And the people, I mean, absolutely, right? I mean, the people that we have joining the Navy now, and the recruiting is getting better every week. They just want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and we're giving it to them. All right, so please help me with the recruiting thing. I guarantee in the next couple of years, actually don't quote me on that, all right, but I'm certain that recruiting will continue to get better as a laser focus on the data behind it. But something you can sort of repeat after me: the Navy is not lowering standards. All right, the standard is you must graduate from boot camp. You must graduate from your A school. Are we allowing more people the opportunity to do that? Absolutely, because we have to and we should. All right, but the standards remain, and we're confident in our force going forward when we do that. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that. I mean, it frustrates the heck out of me to hear senior leadership talk about a woke military and a weak military. And the fact of the matter is we're opening the doors wider, but we're not changing the exit criteria. And our Coast Guard forces of today I would not compete with these people who are coming in our service, both through our boot camps and through our officer session points. Really, really high quality people, energized by the mission, dedicated to the people of this nation every day. So, our commandant says it all the time. We're optimistic about the future of our service. We should be, because we got great people.
Great. Thank you, sir. Dr. Kumar.
Thank you. Likewise, the Merchant Marines, we are optimistic about the future. There are a lot of changes lying ahead for us, starting with the fuel that we use on our ships. Right now there is a significant thrust on future fuel. What's going to be the standard for the fuel that we'll be using on our ships? Given all the attention towards greenhouse gas emissions and net zero by 2050 and so on and so forth. So the requirement for training, et cetera, will increase, and we believe that we can get our merchant mariners up to speed in handling some of these things. Our ships are getting bigger compared to the ship that hit the bridge in Baltimore. There are ships which are much bigger than that. Ships that can carry as many as 24,000 TEUs, containers. That's a lot of containers on board a ship. So yes, the future officers that we are training right now, we have confidence that they'll be able to handle all these things. And also they have the advantage that they are coming in as digital natives, and unlike us who are kind of digital immigrants. So I think they are learning things fast. When you talk to them, their first question is, why don't we have an app for this thing? So that's the world that we are in today, and so we are optimistic.
Great, thank you, sir. Mr. Garcia.
150,000 new shipyard trade workers within the next decade, according to SecNav. I think we got to go to non-traditional populations, cast the net as wide as possible. Displaced workers, the jobs have been offshored, outsourced, digitized, in the very near future, taken up by AI. We've got to be reaching out for them. Adult learners, folks looking to start a second career, and then transitioning vets. We should be in every TAP class, every Compass 360 class. It's a complex mosaic. I think we can get there.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. Thank you to this esteemed panel. Appreciate your support.